What's your worst friend stabbed your backstory? I had a friend who actually stabbed me in the back. He was screwing around with a throwing star and launched it in my general direction trying to scare me. Went in about an inch at the deepest spot. I was pissed. It's all fun and games until someone gets a ninja star in the back. My son was born with a serious congenital heart defect and underwent open heart surgery when he was only 2 weeks old. My best friend at the time said he was coming to the hospital to visit us. I had known this guy for years, been to his wedding, and been in third world countries on humanitarian missions with him. We were close. The guy said he was coming down that afternoon, but he never showed. I called to see if he was still coming, and got his voicemail. I never heard from him again. Found out my friend thought my son deserved a heart defect because he was conceived out of wedlock. I had one friend that would steal from friends pretty regularly. One time I had a small social gathering, 6 or 7 people, and my new smartphone went missing. Scumbag helps me look for the phone in my house for over an hour. Later on I see my phone in his room on his desk. I just took it back, no words were exchanged. I just stopped talking to him altogether after that. Later, he was at a mutual friend's party. Her 80GB iPod goes missing. Me and some other friends were suspicious that it was him, so the next day we called up the local pawn shop and described the iPod. Pawn shop guy said he got one that day. Sure enough, it was under scumbag's name. Pawn shop owner offered to call the cops. We declined. We approached scumbag and told him we knew. He tried to deny it, but we managed to shame him into admitting it. Duck people that steal from friends. Saw someone giving me a hug and told everyone I was cheating on my fiance. Our wedding was to be at the cheater's house, and the backlash was devastating. We cancelled the wedding and got married at the courthouse. My relationship with both of them has changed forever. My buddy introduced me to a lady friend of his at a party. I took an interest in her, asked my buddy if he was cool with me asking her out, and he told me to go for it. She and I had what I thought was a great date. My buddy called me the next day to tell me that the lady wasn't interested and couldn't see a way to let me down gently, so she asked him to tell me to break all contact. About 2 months later, I was drunk dialing various folks, decided to call the lady up and ask her why she had blown me off. She said that my buddy had told her that I wasn't interested and that I wouldn't be calling her anymore. Did you start dating her afterwards? Deliver to this question OP, please. Thank you. Sorry, guys. Didn't think this would blow up as much as it did. OP will now deliver. I would find out later that my buddy had done what he did because he worked with her and had a huge crush on the girl, knew he wouldn't ever be able to get together with her, and felt that when I asked him for his okay, I had put him on the spot and couldn't find the courage to ask me to back off. Once everything was out in the open, we made plans to go out again, but didn't inform my friend that we had uncovered the deception. That was tough to do, because I was thoroughly pissed. I avoided the guy for the next month, ignoring phone calls, etc. He found out about it when I came to pick her up at work one night. Nobody said a word, he just looked at us like we had crushed his soul. It had been her idea to do this, and I was gleefully happy with the idea of doing that, until after I had actually done it. And then a really weird thing happened. My relationship with this lady became all about getting revenge on my friend. Whenever there was a silent moment between us, she'd break it by reminding me of what a donkey had been. A few weeks into it, she'd break the silence by telling me embarrassing stories about him. It seemed like the only thing we really had in common was that we were pissed at my friend. I broke it off after about 2 months. It would be several months until I patched things up with my friend. Ran into him at one of the local bars, and after a talk about bros before hoes it was all patched up. Stole my fiancée from me, just married her using the ring that yours truly bought. Profile picture now features her holding her hand up with that ring and everyone is pretending he bought it for her. Ask for the ring back. If they won't give it back, call the cops with your receipt. Or just remind everyone how it's such a nice ring that you bought, and how your friend is inadequate as a man. When he tried to steal my toy years ago, while we were still in daycare. He told his dad that the toy was his and went to leave. I chased them down before they were to their car, and his dad offered me a measly $1 for the toy, which had a value of around $30. Luckily, my mom was just coming up to the door and she straightened things out. While freelancing on a sweet gig that came out of the blue, I found out that I would be working with Sean, a guy who was in my group at a former ad agency. Awesome, a friendly face. Sean was a geek. No one liked him, and as his associate creative director, supervisor, I looked out for him. He seemed to try hard, and I didn't understand why everyone excluded him. During 2 rounds of layoffs, I went to bat for the guy and saved his job, promising to work with him. He was always busy, and soon after I moved on to a new job. So I looked forward to working with him some more and proving those mean bastards from our old agency wrong. While working this freelance job, I sensed something was wrong soon after it began. Sean had no ideas. None. He literally brought a blank pad in day after day. Excuses were that he was tired, the assignment confused him, etc. I was nervous, but I was stuck. So, since we were on a team, I shared my ideas, our only ideas, with him. We had to present an hour after lunch. During lunch, I had to go to a doctor's appointment with my wife, who was seriously ill. On my way back to the office, the cab I was in had an accident. A donking Lexus slammed into us. No one was hurt, but it totaled both cars. Further, I didn't feel comfortable leaving the cabbie, as he was foreign and spoke little English. The guy who hit us was ranting, so I stayed to give a statement to the police. I called Sean to explain and asked if he minded handling the meeting, and asked him to relay my situation. Then, Prick presented my work, claimed it was all his, and they sent me home because Sean nailed it. Salt in the wound? Took 9 months to get paid for the time I did put in. All along, I tried to explain but no one believed me. He copied my notes in his own writing, and submitted them as proof. As far as they were concerned, I was riding this guy's coattails. I could have kicked his nuts for a week without getting bored. 2 months later, he was found out when he tried it again. Dozens of former co-workers called to rub my nose in it. Still think we're just picking on Sean? I learned that sometimes people are shunned because they deserve it. As roommates in college, we purchased furniture and electronics for the house. The agreement being that when we graduated and moved out, that one would buy the other out. The day comes when my roommate begins packing up for his new job in another city. I say my goodbyes and head to work for the day. I return 8 hours later to an empty house. Douchebag took everything he could. This is not my worst story, but it's definitely the weirdest. I lived with this crazy girl a few years back. She was a fun roommate, but her crazy got old pretty fast. She decided to move out, which was great, because I was done with her drama and really wanted the place to myself. My first night in the place by myself was fantastic. It was quiet and clean, and I couldn't wait to fall asleep. I crawled into bed and pulled my comforter over me, but my comforter felt weird. It felt almost flat. Well, that didn't make any sense because I had a very expensive fluffy down comforter. I checked under my duvet cover, and that bitch switched out my comforter with her dirty nasty Walmart comforter. Who the duck steals someone's comforter? My friend was dating a girl who I could tell just didn't like me, but at least we were civil to one another, until the camping trip on May the 24th holiday weekend. She was adamant about keeping our alcohol separate. That was fine. I had my beer, they had their Mike's Hard Lemonades, fine. Then I got up early on the first morning, and made pancakes for everyone. Why? Because that's just how I roll. When the campers rolled out of their tents to the smell of apple cinnamon pancakes and campfire coffee, she was the only one to flip out. I'd gone into her cooler and used her margarine. My buddy just looked pained and tried to keep the peace, as I tossed her a toonie and apologized. Her reaction was to grab a lock from his gin bag, and lock their tent with their booze and their food. Later, he came to me and asked if he could borrow the car, so that they could run into town, get some condoms and have some words about being a bit easier with the other campers. I said okay, and handed him the keys. When they returned hours later, the tank was empty, and the field kitchen, a wooden box with straps called a wanagon with plates, Cutlery, pots and pans, etc., was missing from the back of the station wagon. We searched the camp, nothing. It was my dad's and had been handed down in the family for generations. I drove off to fill the tank and buy a new tub of margarine, and was halfway down the country road when I saw the wagon on the side of the road, smashed in the ditch. There were marks along the back panels beside the flattened down seats, where one of them had clearly pushed it out the back of the moving car. After piling it all, stunned, piece by piece back into the wagon, I gassed up and drove back, then packed up. Not a word was said by anyone, until I tore up the camping permit and peeled out with their shouts behind me in the dust. Never spoke to either one of them again. I had a friend for 20 years. He called me at night to ask to borrow $3,600. It was for his last year of a degree, and would get him a raise when he graduated. At the time I was making quite a bit of money, and had lots in the bank. He said he would pay me back in a year. 3 years later after the crash he still had not paid me back, and was constantly giving me lame excuses, like he needs 3 vacations a year, and is saving to buy a house. My situation had changed, and he was still not only refusing to pay me back, but still asking for favors and loans. I finally said I was broke, to which he replied, "You are stupid, I am never going to pay you back or help you out." I dropped him as friend, and have had very little contact with him since. He did hire my wife at a company he manages. I guess I should have saw this coming. I had just gotten married and had 2 kids. Another time he said, "Your kids aren't starving." He always just thought of himself. Could not care about anybody else. I guess I thought he was funny. Listened to his hooker stories and finally enough was enough. Last time I talked to him as a friend, he was asking me to get him some marijuana. I said it was way out of my way. I was too busy. He said, "Too much to ask for, eh?" I said, "Well, what would you do for me?" When you grow up with a guy it just seems it is too hard to recognize he isn't really a friend. Kept this inside for a while. Don't have any friends from high school anymore, because they were all like this. Should have hung out with a better class really. My best friend through high school went with me to pick out a winter coat. I'd saved all summer so that I could get a cool one, since my aunt and uncle couldn't afford much. Found one I loved, but she talked me out of it saying it was really weird, and people would make fun of me. The next day Bish wore that jacket I'd loved to school. I had a friend who broke into my house, slashed my couch and stabbed me with a fork. She was convinced that I was sleeping with her boyfriend. He was one of my good high school friends. I had introduced them.